we resume the debate on the amendment to the 28th Amendment, and the next speaker is Deputy Tom Binney.
So you caught me unawares. Yes, I hadn't intended to speak, sir, but given that I was caught out nodding with some approval of what Deputy Joseph was saying, I thought I would clarify my position. I certainly intend to follow my collective responsibility and vote for the Council Minister's amendment, but I would just like to say that from my point of view, a lot of what Deputy Joseph had to say was very sensible, and I would urge members to consider that ongoing, because I really think this Assembly needs to send a message to the economy that we're actually determined to make things start to move. And as I said, I think a lot of what was said in both of the amendments presented by Deputy Joseph had a lot of merit, sir. So I just thought I'd make my position clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Yes, Deputy Bailiff.
So this seems to me to be a rather weak response from the government. The principle of Deputy Joseph's amendment seems to have been accepted by the government, but what they are seeking to do is to pull back in part by suggesting that only a third of the stamp duty surcharge should be restored. The real issue here, it seems to me, sir, is what view the Assembly takes of the value or otherwise of the private rented market. The private rented market is under attack at the moment, and that does not seem to me to be a desirable state of affairs. One can accept the value of the private rented market as well as accepting the desirability of increasing the number of owner-occupiers in the island. For my part, I'm extremely keen to increase the number of owner-occupiers. What I am not so keen on is increasing, as a proportion of the whole, the social rented market, where the state is subsidising people in terms of their accommodation. We ought to be aiming for a situation where people can look after themselves, where they can afford to pay a reasonable rent in the private market, or alternatively to seek to become owner-occupiers. I don't see any merit in the government's amendment to this amendment, and I propose to vote against it.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? In that case, I call upon the Minister to reply. Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, as Deputy, excuse me, Sir, as Deputy Messick pointed out, we have seen in the last couple of years an increase in the number of first-time buyer transactions from 18% last year to between 26 and 28% this year. That positive rebalancing towards first-time buyers is at risk of being reversed as a result of the proposed removal of the stamp duty surcharge, which I don't believe should be supported. The Council of Ministers are mindful, however, that a low number of transactions may be harmful to the housing market and wider economy, and hence have proposed this amendment to Deputy Joseph's amendment, seeking to support the market in a sustainable way. I think I'd also just like to reflect that it's very overly simplistic to say that everything will be well if we remove the stamp duty surcharge. The housing market is a very complex beast. There are numerous issues affecting people's ability to buy, ability to rent, the price at which houses are sold, and to simply suggest that removing 3% of stamp duty, additional stamp duty, will solve that problem is, I think, optimistic. It's important to emphasise that what's being proposed by Amendment 28 is simply a short and sharp holiday, which will not address the underlying stresses in the housing market. The Council of Ministers amendment to instead reduce the 3% to 2% is a more measured approach that will provide some support for the housing market while avoiding the risk of an exacerbated or exaggerated market reaction that would be probable should the 3% surcharge be removed entirely for 1 year. We believe this more measured reduction in the rate may bring some stimulus to the market in 2025 without crowding out first-time buyers, and I urge the members to support this amendment to the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is the appel called for?
Yes, sir.
The appel has been called for. I invite members to return to their seats. I'll ask the greffier to open the voting. On the amendment to the 28th amendment. If all members present in the chamber and attending remotely have the chance to cast their votes, and ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been adopted. 30 votes pour, 14 votes contra. Now move back to the amendment as amended. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment as amended? Yes, Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. I have real reservations in voting for this amendment, but it was a better world to be in than losing 3% entirely. And I come from a position where we have lots of young people, lots of young families, lots of, middle-aged families, lots of older families who are renting and are struggling. And the dream, the pipe dream perhaps of this mythical property ladder, this home that is required, is not there for them. And the last thing we should be doing is making it less expensive for people to buy a second home or property. And this is the issue I have, and I'm sure my colleagues will be groaning when I say this yet again, because I've said it so many times. This is the difference, sir, between a home and a property. It's people's home. Thank you. Their timing's getting better, sir, but it's not quite there. Typical guitarist, but there you go. Now I've lost track of what I was saying. So a home is somewhere where people can be certain that they live and they've got the right to being. And that's the difference between that and an investment property that we've heard before. So in the second round of the world, according to certain deputies in this assembly, about how investment properties and returns aren't good enough, and only a certain percentage will be returned, and people won't therefore not invest. But so there is a huge section of our island who will be listening to that and saying, that doesn't even impact me, because I am struggling to pay the high rents from the buy-to-let investments that have been allowed to happen, many of which are investments from elsewhere. You know, young people are working and they're paying 40-50% of their wage each month just to stay somewhere. And then they're panicking whenever they spill anything on the carpet and worry they're going to lose their deposit. There is a reality in life here, sir, that has to be acknowledged when we talk about housing and homes. And if you are in the position where you can have an investment property, and I will use that word interchangeably at the right time, then if you are renting that out, you may well be having your mortgage paid by the person who is living in that home for them in your property. And if you're buying for a child, that's great if you can be in that position. But if you're then renting it and having that part of it paid by the person who is using it as a home for that time, that is a pretty good position to be in. That you have that property that you can then pass on to a home. I would love to be able to do that. But sir, as has been said before, the property market is much more complex than just stamp duty. And the removal of this, I think, is a halfway house, which I do struggle to support. But the removal entirely is the worst of the world. This is not a particularly great outcome. So we have to make a decision of where we're going to go politically on this one. But sir, we cannot continue to fiddle with this simply to support again and again private rental when, sir, there is such a need amongst people on this island to have affordable homes. And so I have to say that, you know, if interest rates do go down, if people have mortgages on interest rates that are going down, I would love to see in the coming years those rents going down at the same time. They rarely happens that way. And so there are returns on those investments that are made. And if you're having your mortgage paid, you're having the income paid from that by somebody who's living in it, if you have to pay a bit extra in order to stamp duty, so I think that is fair, that's acceptable, and that is something that has to be taken on whenever you look at investment in that way, because this is such a different area of investment. This is investment where people need homes, somewhere to live. It's not an investment in a painting or a car or whatever item of, I was going to say, something, I've lost my word. So it's just so much more intrinsic to that. So I would like to suggest not to change this. It's been having an impact that we wanted. More people are buying first-time buyers. I would like to have seen, perhaps even in the future, and I know this would not work in this assembly at this current time, an increase in that percentage, and perhaps that percentage goes towards first-time buying, helping that way, to even this up a little bit, but that's not happening at the moment. There's no appetite for that. But sir, I would struggle to support this, even though we're in a better position than we were. And I really don't want to see any change in this situation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. The island can't really set interest rates, and we have to respond generally to them. They tend to be influenced by external factors, and lots of that is to do with the performance of economies. There has been mention of the timing in terms of the 3% hike and the increase in first-time buyers. There also has been mention of how interest rates sort of fell around the same time. So I would urge States members to support this amendment, but I don't quite agree with my colleague that it is appropriate to revisit this matter and to actually have a lot closer look at whether we've got correlation or causation. It is appropriate to do the analysis. And we do really need to think it's not just about, people, when we actually talk about housing people and people wanting to buy, let's not forget that houses do need to be maintained. When I'm actually employing Joe the plumber, Joe the plumber may well be saving for his own house. He may well be paying his own mortgage, and everything filters through and ends up making it expensive for everyone else. And the more we keep adding to things, the more we add to the problems of cost of living. So as I say, I just hope that people will realise that what we should be doing as a government is responding, properly analysing and not making assumptions. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment as amended? Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to raise a couple of things that when I've had discussions with my friends, with family, with constituents, that I'm not sure have been completely taken on board. And some of them are young families who own homes already but may not be able to upgrade, for example, because, well, for whatever reasons. But I just feel that, and when I've spoken to them about this, that this is wrong. This is not the aim. We shouldn't be aiming to encourage people to treat homes as a business opportunity. We have to remember that landlords, well, that over the years, home owner occupiers with mortgages have had, for example, their mortgage interest relief slowly phased out. This hasn't happened with landlords. Landlords that still have their mortgage interest relief, they can still get that. So that is an advantage for them. On top of that, sir, I'm also an owner-occupier. Any improvements I may do within my home, they are not tax deductible. As a landlord, yours are. So, sir, it just feels very wrong that we are almost encouraging investment buyers, but we're not supporting those who are owner-occupiers in the same way. And that's also not to mention one of the issues that we've had in the past before, and that actually I think I've seen in the past few months as well, which is this encouragement of lock up and leave properties as well. So this amendment is wrongly targeted, in my opinion. We should be keeping the stamp duty exactly as it is and not touching it. If we really value our young islanders and we really value people who want to be owner-occupiers and who want to facilitate that journey for them, we should be rejecting this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on this amendment? Deputy Bailiff.
Yes, sir, thank you. I mentioned earlier that we are having this debate based on a snapshot, when in fact we are in the middle of a process. I think it's as if you took a freeze frame of a football match and decided to change all your tactics on the basis of that single freeze frame. The freeze frame tells you very little. It may have very little relationship to the actual state of the game. It is the flow of the game, or the trend, that is important. It's only if you press the rewind button, go back to the start of the game, and then press play, that the game makes sense. You see the context. You see who is on the attack, who is on the defensive, and so on. In terms of the property market, for example, you see the freeze frame shows the market at low levels of activity, but the trend shows that it is picking up. The freeze frame shows that prices are still high compared to earnings, but the trend shows that the gap is closing. The freeze frame shows that the construction sector is in a downturn. The trend shows you that it was coming off a boom. The central point is that the 3% surcharge is working. It's not the only factor in play. There are many other factors that people have pointed to, but it is a factor, and it works exactly as intended by dampening investor demand. We know that it's working because the investment sector is telling us that it is working. They wouldn't want it changed otherwise. The biggest problem with the cut to 2% is that it will have all the unintended consequences the Treasury Minister outlined so eloquently in arguing against the 25th Amendment. It will bring forward transactions rather than stimulate the market. It will prevent the market adjustment that is underway from continuing, or at least reduce its adjustment, and it will increase investor demand, pushing up prices to the benefit of the seller, but not the buyer. But losing our nerve now would also create another problem. My belief is that the investor sector needs to adjust to the 3% surcharge. If we reduce the rate to 2%, even for a year, then they will know that pressure works. And I suspect with that, they will be back for more. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it's a racing certainty that Deputy Joseph would be back next year with a proposal to either extend the cut to 2% or to have another bash at getting rid of it altogether. I think we would be much better to send a clear message from this Assembly that a 3% stamp duty surcharge is the floor. It is not something that should be cut when there is a market downturn. It is something that we could look at potentially increasing when the market turns up. Why? Because we need to remember what happened when the market went bonkers. People buying properties to flip them a year later. We put the rate higher to deter behaviours like short-term flipping. People buying properties like they were bulk purchasers in the supermarket. Even if, and as Deputy Isles said, people buying them, locking them up, moving away and just leaving them empty so that they could sell them after the capital gain had appreciated over the next year or so. Even if the stamp duty surcharge stays at 3%, long term, the Jersey property market is still a buy. Investors in Jersey property pay no capital gains tax on their gains and they pay no inheritance tax. That means for investors with capital or with access to capital, Jersey property is a superb investment. It means they are likely to bid up the price of property, particularly in the knowledge that over the medium to long term, the price of Jersey property goes up. I think I'm correct in saying there has never been a 10-year period that shows a fall in the price of property in Jersey. And all the gains are tax-free. In an expensive market with homeowners straining every financial sinew to meet high prices, it is relatively easy for an investor to trump the homeowner. That is what we saw happening in the past. What the surcharge does is make investors think a little bit more about whether to buy a property, to look at it a bit more closely. It makes, for example, buying to flip a property in a year or two a lot more risky. So one of the other central claims in the original amendment is that the stamp duty surcharge has led to a reduction in the supply of rental property and therefore is driving up prices. The trouble is, even Deputy Joseph's own report confirms that this isn't the case. The supply of rental property has, he says in his report, stagnated. Stagnated. Well, stagnated is an interesting word. Stability is another word. The supply of rental accommodation is stable, which is what you'd expect, given that the stamp duty surcharge has no impact on existing supply. No one who currently owns a rental property pays the stamp duty surcharge on it. And the other point, I think it was Deputy Mesick who made the point, rents are currently falling. Neither of those two assertions are correct. So the 3% surcharge isn't anti-landlord. It has no effect on landlords currently operating. They don't pay the surcharge. It does act as a brake on investors buying property. Yep, that's the point, to rebalance a biased market. The Deputy says he wants a balanced market, but I would argue that that is what the surcharge helps achieve. He says that when the surcharge was proposed, it was to give a competitive advantage to homeowners. No, it wasn't to give them an advantage, it was to put them at less of a disadvantage. We are in the middle of a process of rebalancing the market. With house prices coming down, rents are also falling, and there has been, as Deputy Mesick said, a fall in the number of properties sold to investors and an almost exactly equal rise in the number of properties bought by the first-time buyers. Bullseye. Essentially, the problem we're tackling is that property has become commoditized into a financial asset and investors have advantages in the market. The surcharge is the one countervailing measure to try and level the playing field. And we have to look a little bit wider. In the UK, they are increasing that surcharge from 3% to 5%. And they also have capital gains tax and inheritance tax. And we do need to pay attention to that here because people in Jersey have international investment portfolios. As the UK increases its rates, Jersey may become more attractive, and an investment holiday, a holiday on the surcharge, makes it more attractive still. And if we look even further afield, countries and cities and regions across Europe are grappling with house prices that have risen way ahead of earnings. Barcelona, Lisbon, I'm sure people have read about them. In all of them, the reason is essentially the same. Too much hot investment money competing with homeowners and driving up the price of property. There is a cry to do something for the property market, do something for construction. And I agree that we should be thinking about those sectors. They are very, very important. But that is an argument for some kind of intervention, not one that is going to defeat the objectives that we have set ourselves in terms of curbing investor demand in the market. All that has changed since the 3% surcharge was introduced, all that has changed is that it has shown to work. So I respectfully suggest the amendment is rejected. We stick with the 3% surcharge and we stick with a policy that's working, a policy that does a modest amount to rebalance a housing market that was previously out of control and which would return to have negative impacts were we to change our minds now.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment as amended? I call upon Deputy Joseph to reply. Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Sir, I suppose one has to be grateful for something, and I am grateful that the Assembly has voted to at least send a message in supporting, and I hope the government's amendment is going to be supported, that actually we are actually serious about dealing with Jersey's supply issues. I understand this idea that there is and was a problem of hot money supposedly being invested in private sector rental properties. When interest rates were on the floor and when there was other uncertainties in stock markets, that was certainly happening. But I think it would be wrong to also ignore the fact that there are a lot of people who were buying property for their children, their nephews and nieces, etc. Many of the people in Horizon were doing that, and I'm not going to get involved in any of the arguments about that because it's still before the courts. But there are real issues about who we define, and I want to say in bringing this to a conclusion, in hoping that members are going to at least agree to the 2% kind of compromise, that we do welcome investment into the private sector market. We welcome those commitments that have been given by parents and grandparents and people who are allowing people to rent. I don't think it is a binary choice. Ultimately, and as a former planning minister, I would have hoped that Deputy Bailiff would have at least said something in his remarks, that it's not just about cutting the cake differently, about buyers and sellers, about renters versus buyers, that actually the thing that I've yearned for, that I've argued for years, is an increase in supply. And there doesn't seem to be much happening on the supply side. There's homes being built by Andium, but there is nothing else. And I'm worried about the message that that's sending out. A reduction in surcharge is certainly a positive signal that is going to send at least some message to the landlords And landlords, it's not just a case of the landlords being unaffected by this. Landlords die. People die when they're getting older. There are a lot of older people that have put money in and their properties are getting inherited and they get sold. The actual reality is that the stock of housing is falling. I've got some statistics. I'll send them round to members. Members may be surprised to see quite how strong rents have increased compared to house prices. It's astonishing. And that's only going to get worse unless we agree at least something to give some investor confidence, because it is about investor confidence. And it's not, I'm not here saying the entire future of Jersey needs to be in private rental properties. I'm absolutely not. For all my political career, I fought tooth and nail to get home ownership. But we need to understand that there is 25% of our community who are renters, and they need people to invest in that market. And currently, Deputy Mezek can say that there are all these properties available on places.je, but did he actually say to the Assembly at what price they were? They're shocking. And they're shocking because there's a decreasing supply. And there's a decreasing confidence because the cost of regulation, etc. It's a perfect storm. So I'm going to wind up this debate. I'm curious about how the council ministers work in this assembly, sir. I've heard 2 assistant ministers and a minister speak against. I was very grateful for the deputy chief minister to say some nice things about some of the things I said, because I'll be back in this assembly, sir. I'll be back week in, week out, arguing for the issues of supply, because there's much to do. And I think that the people that brought us here in the elections in 2022 expected us to do far more, far more, sir, in relation to the issue of housing. Housing remains a crisis, and we are here making some decisions about a budget and doing something about alleviating some of their concerns. And it's not just the concerns of those individuals, it's those people who've got the money to invest to make it happen. And making it happen means refurbishing properties that can be rented. It means getting workmen busy. And if we send a message out that at least we're prepared to do something, that'll be a good thing. And I urge members to enthusiastically, government members included, I'd have liked it to be higher, but at least we'll get the 2% and they will send a bit of a message of confidence out. So I urge members to absolutely reject, with the greatest of respect, the arguments that this is simply a renters versus buyer. It's not. We need both, and we need to deal with the supply side if you're going to argue that point. I urge members to support the 2% as amended, sir.
Thank you. Is the appel called for? So it's been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I'll ask the greffier to open the voting. Voting on the removal of the stamp duty surcharge on second homes as amended. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes both here and remotely. Ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment, as amended, has been rejected. 23 votes for, 24 votes contra.
May we have them all, please?
Yes, of course.
Those members voting for the Conetaba, St Helier, St Brelard, Trinity, St Peter, St John, Grouville and St Saviour, and deputies Luce, Morel, Lehegara, Gorst, Farnham, Osoph, Balash, War, Scott, Miller, Howell, Tom Binet, Ferry, Barbara Ward, Wilson and Rose Binet. And those members voting contre, the Conetaba, St Martin, St Clement and St Mary, and deputies Southern, Tadier, Ayer, Rob Ward, Alves, Gardner, Moore, Mesick, Coles, Porre, Miles, Renouf, Feltham, Jearn, Kovac, Alex Curtis, Andrews, Catherine Curtis, the Conetaba, St Juan, and deputies Labbe and Dublin.
There are no amendments which impact paragraphs B, C and D of the main proposition. So we now move to paragraph E and the 24th amendment lodged by Deputy Osoph in respect of the agricultural loan restriction. Deputy Osoph, there are two amendments lodged to your amendment, one by Deputy Jearn and one by the Council of Ministers. Do you accept either of those amendments?
So I willingly accept Deputy Jean's, but if she wishes to make some remarks in proposing it, I thought that it would be helpful if she did actually make some remarks, because I think there was an important issue that she's raising, which I completely agree with. So I want to accept it, but I wanted to give Deputy Jean the opportunity of saying why hemp is important.
Well, I didn't know that's... Well, before we come to that stage, are...
I'm not accepting the government amendment, sir.
Are members content for the amendment of Deputy Osoph, the 24th amendment, to be read as amended by Deputy Jearn?
Sir?
Are content. Deputy Morel?
I think it may actually work better if it wasn't read as amended, Deputy Osoph's. I'm just thinking of the range of options, so I was thinking that
Anyone
actually,
can object. Do you object to it being read as amended?
I think it would be better if they're read separately, sir.
Yes. So there will be a separate debate on Deputy Jearn's amendment shortly. I ask the greffier to read the 24th amendment.
Page 2, paragraph E. After the words identified before the 31st of December 2025, insert the words, subject also to restrictions on the provision of agricultural loans to exclude provision of such loans for any purposes relating to the cultivation of cannabis in Jersey. Page 4, paragraph O. After the words are set out in the appendix to the accompanying report, insert the words, except that on page 75, after the bullet points, there should be inserted a new paragraph as follows. The utilisation of funds from the Agricultural Loans Fund will be subject to restrictions and exclude the provision of such loans for any purposes relating to the cultivation of cannabis in Jersey.
Deputy Osoph.
Thank you, sir. I rise to speak on this amendment to exclude cannabis cultivation from being classified as agriculture within the remit of both the government subsidies and the financial support. This amendment is not whether medicinal cannabis has a role in the Jersey economy. It clearly does. It is clearly something that, as we've heard, is in widespread circulation by way of prescriptions. No doubt that is helping people with those medical conditions. However, we do also need to ensure that our public resources, if we're hearing such difficulties that the Treasury Minister is having with balancing the books, that those resources that are available are applied appropriately and aligned with the principles of fairness and transparency. Agriculture, sir, I declare being a landowner. I'm no longer I saw my declaration of interest. I'm a farmer's son, my father being a constable and a working farmer. I've always taken the general view that subsidies end up getting capitalised into asset prices, which is an interesting concept in the debate we've just had. But agriculture, and horticulture that we have understood, encompassing our beloved industries such as dairy, vegetables, new potatoes, and whilst horticulture is now looking rather sad with derelict greenhouses, etc., but there's a point about that with the agricultural loan scheme. Our agricultural sector has effectively still, remarkably, faced immense challenges over the years. I often say I was born with a shovel in my mouth and I'm supposed to be a farmer. There are more Rwandan cows in Jersey than there are in Highstead Rwandan cows in Rwanda than there are in Jersey. But of course our cow bloodstock is in the island still. And of course farmers are now facing significant problems with the move to the living wage, labour shortages and market competition and market access. They remain, if anything, compared to a number of years ago, so important for our food security, which is now such an important issue. And thank goodness my earlier concerns in my political career about the ban, about the imposition of EU rules allowing the importation of milk never came about, but it was a real issue. My amendment seeks to ensure that public funds earmarked for agricultural support are not diverted to a nascent and what is clearly a very speculative industry like cannabis, medicinal cannabis cultivation. I hesitate to use the word medicinal cannabis cultivation because I'm now aware of one particular of those large cannabis providers having been recapitalized by people that are involved in the recreational cannabis business. And that operates in an entirely different premise. I thought we were investing in the medicinal cannabis industry, but I've heard words from ministers that might not be what they're now seeking to do. I think we've got to recognise the significant capital investment and commercial nature of the cannabis industry. It's profit-driven, it's often backed by private investors, and it's in many cases business models that not only rely on the same sustainability principles, but they're very different from those of traditional farmers. They're basically investors in businesses for effectively what I thought was a medicinal product. They are not the caricature of farming as we have heard, and perhaps we're more alert to it now, so with the debates in the United Kingdom about inheritance tax and all the dreadful situation where we're seeing. And the reality is my family's not any different. My family were farmers, but of course we found it very difficult to continue, and I wasn't necessarily cut out to be a farmer. Farmers work, they're asset rich and they're cash poor. And what we're trying to do with the Agricultural Loans Fund, which is something I absolutely agree with, I commend the Minister for bringing it forward. That Agricultural Loans Fund of the past has meant that there has been investments in agriculture that have made a real difference to the competitiveness of the agricultural industry today. There were milking parlours, there are cattle sheds, there are potato production facilities which have been assisted by the Agricultural Loans Fund. And I think that that's a really good, as we see the huge opportunities that there are in agriculture, in enhanced digital technology, there are some really good opportunities. But the Minister is only proposing £2 million for the capitalisation of that fund. If we start saying now that we're going to widen the definition of agriculture for cannabis, it's going to mean that there's less money available for our agriculture and horticulturalists to do what they need and what we need them to do, which is invest in productivity, in basically dealing with what we're inflicting upon them in terms of the living wage, all those investments that they've got to do with net zero and etc. And if we are only going to put 2 million, and I haven't amended it, I just absolutely know, I wasn't in the Assembly at the time, sir, that when the advancement of this cannabis industry was coming on, it was going to be fantastic. We were going to have a new finance industry, I was told. And I've got the quotes from the Minister of the day in speaking in Toronto about just how marvellous this thing was going to be. And I'm sorry, but I just cannot, and I don't, I've been a minister like the Chief Minister is today. he and I both have to clean up the interesting thing about the Innovation Fund. You win some, you lose some. I understand that. I get that. I don't necessarily criticise somebody coming along and saying they're going to do things. The Minister for Sustainable Economic Development is having a particularly hard time at the moment. But I commend him and I know what his job is like. But I ask members, including the current Chief Minister and the Economic Development Minister, whether they're really going to start saying that the cannabis cultivation business is deserving of funding from the monies that were supposed to be to support and to protect and enhance our future agriculture and horticultural sectors. We were told that it was going to be fantastic, that all these investors were going to come in. I'm told there's £60 million invested in the industry. Well, I see from one annual report that 30 million has been written off. They've had a 90% haircut. So there might be 60 million, but 30 of it's been written off, gone. So, are we really going to be here now, reinventing history? Are we still going to say, are members still wanting to say, yeah, jolly good thing? I mean, I've had to stand here and defend myself against the Innovation Fund. Well, my goodness me, I've got out of that just about alive. But really, are we really going to start speculating on using public money for cannabis, for medicinal? I think it was medicinal cannabis, but apparently now it might not be, because it might not be a medicinal cannabis market. So we might be exporting cannabis for recreational uses. I've heard that from ministers. The ministers are telling me no, but I've done quite a lot of research on this. I've certainly been around the plants that stink to high heaven when you go around them. I feel sorry for all those planning people that have to live next to them. I didn't know whether or not you get stoned by just smelling the stuff. But anyway, I certainly do know that I don't think it was quite what we thought when we were promised this new fantastic industry. It was going to be self-sustaining and absolutely wonderful and going to be doing fantastic things for Jersey. Well, we clearly have some issues to deal with. How on earth it is that investors have lost so much money? How on earth of it has got that people are living next to these places that are now causing real problems? And I've seen them. And I have no taste or smell, sir, but I can smell some things, and I can smell cannabis. And I had to ask a friend whether or not I was going to get stoned by what I was when I was smelling. Now, do we want to put more money, public money, into it? Really? I don't think so. And I absolutely am shocked to hear that all the 25 medicinal cannabis prescriptions that have been issued with no regulation, as the kind Minister of Health told us last week, he's got a difficult job on his hands, making a decision of this assembly work without any regulation, and he's now got even more pressures on his mental health strategy. Well, I'm sorry, sir. This is an opportunity to send a very clear message that we're not going to treat medicinal cannabis industry as agriculture, because it clearly isn't. It's a medicinal cannabis, it's a medicine producing business, sir. That's what it was sold as, that's what it was, so it's not agriculture. So I couldn't get out of the Minister of the Day, and I do sympathise greatly with the inheritance that the Minister has, dealing with all sorts of difficulties, but I'm so sorry, really, this is a medicine business, it's not agriculture. Let's call a spade and a shovel, and let's help our shoveling farmers with all the difficulties they've got, and let's help the dairy farmers, because if there's going to be some loans available, then let's get our dairy farmers who are struggling. Let's get our new potatoes and our other market gardeners so we can be more food security in Jersey, doing like the Deputy Moore wanted to do and all these other things. Those are the things we want to do. More sheep, more things like that, and more environmentally friendly. We're imposing huge environmental issues on our farmers. So we need to give them the help that they want, and the scarce money that's got to be available have got to be available for them, not medicinal cannabis or recreational cannabis if it becomes to that way. I make the proposition, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded? Thank you. And we now come to the first amendment, the amendment lodged by Deputy Jeune, and I ask the Greffier to read the amendment.
Page 2, paragraph 1, after the words cannabis in Jersey, insert the words that will be used in cannabis-based products for medicinal use. Page 2, paragraph 2, after the words cannabis in Jersey, insert the words that will be used in cannabis-based products for medicinal use.
Deputy Chair.
Thank you, sir. My amendment asks for there to be a distinction made between the cultivation of cannabis for medical purposes and the cultivation of industrial hemp. This would work with both the Deputy Osiff's amendment and the subsequent Council of Ministers amendment to his amendment. However, though Deputy Osiff has agreed to my amendment, the Council of Ministers does not want members to support my amendment to the amendment because it would create a distinction between growers of the same plant. With respect, sir, this doesn't hold up. The matter of the fact is that there is already a distinction within Jersey law between growers of the same plant. The Misuse of Drugs Order 2020 recognises a distinction defining industrial hemp as a plant of the genus cannabis with a THC content not exceeding 0.2%, cultivated for the purposes of using only the mature stalk of such a plant, fibre produced from mature stalk of any such plant, or the seed of any such plant. Also, in Jersey's Income Tax Amendment of Law Taxation of Cannabis Companies Regulations 2021 Article 123DA also defines the difference between companies in the cannabis industry and industrial hemp. These legal distinctions already exist within our domestic framework. Internationally, the differentiation is also well established. Article 28 of the UN Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs 1961 states that the convention shall not apply to the cultivation of the cannabis plant exclusively for industrial purposes or horticultural purposes. The NHS guidance for cannabis-based products of medical use further recognises this separation. So these examples demonstrate that the distinction between medical cannabis and industrial hemp is already embedded in law and policy. For the Council of Ministers to argue otherwise in rejecting my amendment is not only inaccurate, but quite frankly, I think lazy. Why have I called for this distinction? Because industrial hemp has immense environmental and economic potential that Jersey is uniquely positioned to leverage. The government itself acknowledged this in its 2020 report on carbon sequestration and the role of soil and crops, which noted that 1 hectare of industrial hemp can absorb 22 tonnes of CO2 annually. With 2 growing cycles per year, this absorption rate could double. Hemp's rapid growth, up to 4 metres in just 100 days, makes it one of the most efficient tools converting CO2 to biomass, outperforming agroforestry. Hemp is also highly versatile in its ability to extract harmful chemicals, such as PFAS and PFOS, from the soil. These are chemicals of particular concern for Jersey, as the issue of PFAS contamination continues to resurface, and we hear regularly from concerned islanders. Moreover, Jersey has a long history of hemp cultivation, dating back to at least 1533, when it was grown for ship rigging and rope. By excluding hemp cultivation from the agricultural loan scheme, we risk losing an opportunity to support both our environment and our traditional agricultural heritage. The main question to be asked here is, should the cultivation of cannabis for use in cannabis-based products for medical use receive agricultural loans at all? And I don't believe it should. I think that Jersey agricultural loans should be mainly focused on supporting inputs and infrastructure to help farmers produce food, to support smallholder organic farmers, to entice young people into farming, to foster innovation. These loans should underpin succession planning for Jersey's vital agricultural sector. And as Deputy Osiff alluded to earlier, I thought that the introduction of the medical cannabis industry was because it was Jersey's next big thing, next big growth sector. And if it is, why is this industry needing subsidies at all from the same pot as our food producers? The industry should be able to apply for the productivity grant that we run for Jersey business, for example. They'll be able to get access to whatever package is being developed from Pillar 2 receipts to enhance the competitiveness of the island. In short, this industry already has ample access to subsidies and doesn't need to dip into funds intended for our farmers. In fact, I think treating medical cannabis growing as farming or part of agriculture has led to some significant policy failings, including poor quality control. What should happen is that the whole life cycle should be treated as part of the medical process, and then therefore ensure there is embedded quality assurance from cultivation through to prescribing as defined in the UN Single Convention obligations, but as yet Jersey fails to adhere to this convention. So in summing up, sir, I would like to urge the members to understand that industrial hemp, what I'm asking for, is to support this differentiation between industrial hemp and cannabis, because industrial hemp offers tangible environmental benefits, diverse byproducts and historical significance to Jersey's agriculture sector, and excluding it from support undermines its potential contribution to our island's economy and sustainable goals. So for this reason, I urge members to consider what is truly best for Jersey and for Jersey's agriculture and environment and support my amendment to the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Deputy Talia, you already relied on a while ago. Will you speak about now in relation to this matter?
No, I wish to speak on the main
In due
debate,
course.
sir, so it doesn't mean I won't speak necessarily on this, but if you can take me off the list, please.
Yes, Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. I'm enormously grateful for, and I'm glad that it wasn't read as amended, because I was so pleased when Deputy Joan raised this with me, and I said, well, I'm happy to do it, but please, Deputy, could you put your own amendment in? And I'm so glad she's done it, because it actually gives us an opportunity to speak about the hemp, because I didn't in the slightest bit intend to exclude hemp at all. But I understand the point, and the point I wish just to make is that my understanding is that you can, at an extreme, it's very expensive to do apparently, but you can extract THC for the purposes of the recreational cannabis from hemp. It's very expensive to do, and that's why the grey area has been there, and that's why we've got a problem with one of our valued hemp producers in the UK having a problem with the export, because it is regarded as a grey area. But as the Deputy has eloquently said, there's every reason why, and I absolutely agree that it should be treated like a good agricultural crop. She's absolutely right. It was 17th and 18th century that we had ropes made from hemp. Hemp actually is a crop not just of the past, it's of the future. And it's basically a wonderful crop that can be used for all sorts of environmental goals, agricultural diversity, sustainability, and it's completely different from medicinal cannabis. It requires a completely different regulation. It requires some because of this DHE thing, but it basically can be used into all sorts of exciting small businesses, turned into textiles, biocompost, construction materials, biodegradable plastics, alternatives for that, food products, and even renewable biofuels, which is something I'd like to speak about in a bit in the other. And it's also a source of, you didn't mention CBD oil, which is of course which is also the very important product that I know, I've never used it, but I understand it's of enormous benefit to people. And there's a fantastic growth small industry in Jersey about CBD oil as a result of the hemp stuff. And that's nothing to do with cannabis. It's actually really helpful to a number of different complaints. So I'm so grateful for the Deputy for bringing this amendment. It should absolutely be part of our agricultural toolkit, and it shouldn't have any other rules or regulations on it. And I fully support and thank the Deputy most warmly for I inadvertently might have caught hemp if she hadn't brought that law forward. So I'm very grateful for her. Thank you, sir.
Yes, Deputy Luce.
Thank you, sir. I won't speak for long, and I'll only talk once in this particular amendment, regardless of how many times we get up to speak. As the Deputy that brought this proposition back to the Assembly over a year ago now, just over a year ago, to recapitalise the existing agricultural loan scheme, I thought I might just have a few words to say. And the first thing I would say is to repeat the recapitalisation of the existing agricultural loan scheme, a scheme that had been in place for very many decades, and certainly long before anybody thought of growing hemp or cannabis in greenhouses. And so when I bought that proposition, I had a vision in my mind, and that was the short phrase that conjures up people's ideas of brown cows in green fields. And that was my intention. The green fields, okay, could be grass, they could be potatoes, they could actually be hemp as well. And when I was previously Environment Minister, I went to great pains to encourage and help the start of those hemp trials that took place in St Peter's and fields in St Mary's hidden away where people couldn't see. The whole idea there was to create a new industry to diversify agriculture so that farmers anywhere who had fields could go out and start to grow this crop. Sir, when I bought the proposition, I was thinking not about starting up medicinal cannabis farms and the many tens of millions of pounds that needs to be invested and risked in many cases to do that, but I was thinking more so about small amounts of money to help existing farmers with their productivity, to combat the rise in the minimum wage, to help them diversify the type of things they might do with our countryside to keep it green and beautiful. And I leave it there. That's the two industries have enormously different business methods, business models, as Deputy Joseph has said, and Deputy Jean as well. They couldn't be further apart, and I just reiterate that when I brought forward this proposal for £10 million to go back into the agricultural loan scheme, the last thing I intended to do was to see this money go into medicinal cannabis production. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Tadia.
Thanks. I will speak now. Not that I'm an expert in this, but having brought a proposition in the last Assembly which did look at the serious issue of medicinal cannabis, I did have to do a certain amount of research, paper-based research, I hasten to add, to bring this to the Assembly. And what we're dealing with here, see what I did there? We're talking about an agricultural loan scheme here, and I've not heard anything that's been presented today from either the mover of the original proposition or this amendment by Deputy Jean that actually tells us why they've got a problem with cannabis. I've heard very strongly the message, we don't like it, and if Deputy Russell Labby was still in the Assembly, I'd say we don't like it and we don't want it. That's the only argument we seem to have heard today, and it seems to be very moralistic. I joked with my party colleagues that we seem to be seeing the emergence of a new political party in this Assembly, which is probably called the Christliche Demokratische Union, if I was still in Berlin, or the Christian Democrats in the Assembly, who simply want to get rid of anybody having fun, tax, and because they think cannabis is associated still with this concept of reefer madness from the 1920s and 30s, as soon as it's mentioned in any form, they get very hot under the collar, sir. So I'd like to bring us back to reality and look at actually what is agriculture. So if I bring up the definition of agriculture on my computer dictionary, it says the science or practice of farming, including cultivation of the soil for the growing of crops and the rearing of animals to provide food, wool, and here's the key bit, and other products. So cannabis clearly does fall into the and other products part of it. Now, if we then look at what maybe crops are, how does Wikipedia define crops? It says that a crop is a plant that can be grown and harvested. No great shakes there, I think we all knew that. And it can be done so extensively for profit or subsistence. So it could be done for either. So you don't have to be able to eat whatever product it is that somebody might be growing in Jersey at any one time. Similarly, in the way that when Jersey had quite a thriving carnation industry, under glass houses for export before the LVCR, that you couldn't eat carnations as far as I know, but you could certainly put them on your lapel on Liberation Day, and people wanted to buy carnations. And I'm sure that if the agricultural scheme had existed back then, maybe it did, or the current scheme, that they could have applied for that. And you know what? It would have been decided not on the basis of a prejudice against carnations, but it had been done on the basis of whether you met the criteria for the loan scheme. Not because you were grown up as a son of a cow farmer and you didn't like carnations or you didn't like cannabis, but you'd actually say, does this have merit? Do you need the money? Is there an economic argument for us to give you the loan? And then, of course, we look at the Agricultural Loans Fund, as is currently live on the government website. And it says that the government of Jersey has an agricultural loans fund. It aims to empower farmers. So farmers, I'm afraid, do include cannabis growers, whether we like them or not, whether we like the industry or not. They are farmers. They grow things. They're taking a risk with their own money. They have land that they either rent or that they own, but probably that they rent off other landowners. And they're trying to make a fist of it economically for whatever reason. It may be to grow hemp, it might be to grow flowers for medicinal use, it might be for CBD extraction, or it might be for THC extraction. And we're already seeing this very strange differentiation between THC and CBD. I know full well what they are, but they all can be described as medicinal because CBD products are used medicinally, therapeutically as well. Hand creams will be sold with lots of CBD in them, but actually there's often a mix between THC and CBD which need to be put in different variations and different ratios, which can have all sorts of medicinal benefits. And I wonder, why are we getting our underwear in a twist over this, if I can say that, sir? Whilst you were not necessarily immediately listening.
Well, you took advantage of me there.
Over this, if people want to take risks with their own money, then let them. And I'm also worried about the sound. If we're being told that the cannabis industry is, on the one hand, very successful, therefore they don't need to apply for the loan in the first place, well, that's fine. We don't have anything to worry about. But it might be actually that somebody's got a great idea. It is lucrative. They can make it work because they found a new angle, and they do need access to that loan scheme. And it could be a great success story for them or for somebody else. So you might not necessarily expect me to be the great bastion supporter of, if that's the word, of liberalism in the economy. But I do think that actually, if it's not a problem, why are we worrying about it? Of course, part of the agricultural loan scheme does talk about enhancing food security to uplift both individual farmers and the wider agricultural community. But it says to ensure that it's prosperous, profitable, and has a sustainable future. And it also talks about providing essential financial support to drive growth, to spark innovation, and to build resilience. We're already going to see some, I believe, some savings or cuts during this budget, which are going to be very difficult for ministers to justify because they don't know what effect it is going to have actually when it comes to driving growth, sparking innovation, and building resilience in the economy. And I think we shouldn't be doing anything during this debate here about cannabis to say, actually, we want to tamper with it simply because we don't like a particular product which might be used for a particular end. I think we need to step back and allow the scheme to be administered correctly, at arm's length, looking at the criteria, all of those things, which does include food security, but which also talks about financial support for innovation and growth, which is something we're critically going to need in the island in the next few months and years if we are to have going to have a strong economy. Because, you know, as a socialist, I want to be able to spend that tax money, but we do need a strong economy to be able to do it, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. And before I go, I will obviously declare I'm also a landowner. I'm obviously very cautious. Deputy Joseph will jump up quickly and alert me to anything I forget to declare during my speeches. Thank you for the interjection, Deputy. But moving to why I've stood up on this one, and I will speak on the next amendment, is to just caution members who were perhaps worried by Deputy Tadier in his comments there that those who do support a differentiation in definitions are those who may be part of what he seems to see as a new temperance movement or something similar. And I would ask him to look at the voting record on Deputy Cole's proposition, decriminalisation of cannabis, and to those who brought amendments and those who voted. And it'll be clearly aware to members of this Assembly that those who vote on this amendment and on the next amendment and the substantive amendment to the budget may do so for reasons of economics. They may do so for the reasons of how they want agricultural loans secured against assets. That's something I'll talk about in the next amendment. But certainly they may not be doing that because they do like it or not of a certain plant. And so members should not be persuaded by that argument. They should think about the economics behind this. And the case that any farming is farming and should be treated the same, it is an interesting one. And the truth is, it would be lovely in the new year to see a clearer set of guidance on the agricultural loan scheme as to what applies. Only recently, the Planning Committee entered some interesting policy debates through applications as to whether a form of agriculture was required inside or outside the built-up area. And the feedback was not from any single department or body or voice on the matter unanimous. There are always going to be cut-offs as to why something is applicable or not. In this case, the definition between industrial hemp and cannabis genus for the purposes of medicinal products may well be the correct cut-off, but members certainly do not think those who vote in favour of such are doing so because they have a certain anti-proclivity to the wider public consuming a plant here or abroad.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. I'm finding this debate really interesting, actually, and I'm really grateful to Deputy Jeanne for bringing this. Some of the evidence and the facts and figures that she had around hemp has really informed my thinking on this. And I'm definitely going to support this amendment to the amendment. And the simple point that really resonated with me was around the ecological benefits of hemp. And I would be interested to know actually if those benefit, so as I understand they're slightly different crops, I might have misunderstood that, but whether the plant is being grown for medicinal purposes or whether it's being grown as industrial hemp, aren't those ecological benefits the same? That's perhaps a question that might be addressed in the debate on the main amendment. But the thing that has convinced me is the ecological argument. And in terms of what kind of island we want our children to grow up in, I think as much agriculture as possible is the better option to go for, because anything growing in a field surely is going to be better for our children to be growing up alongside green fields of whatever is growing in them. And it sounds like hemp is a particularly beneficial crop to be growing. So on that basis, I will be supporting this amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other wish to speak on this amendment? Yes, the Deputy Coles, then the Conotava, St Martin and St Mary. Yes, Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. I'm just going to, like the Minister for the Environment, I'm just going to speak once on this amendment from Amendment and all the way through. Firstly, to say that I do support Deputy Jeanne's amendment to this proposition. I think that we do have to make the difference between medicinal cannabis as well as, I was trying to use the word regenerative hemp, because that's kind of more the system of how it is used to grow. We have long had a history in Jersey of relying on monocrops. We know we're famous for our potatoes and our cows, but not a huge amount else from our fields. And I think anything that supports a diversification in our agriculture is a good thing that we should be supporting. In regards to Deputy Joseph's amendment to exclude cannabis from medicinal cannabis from the agricultural loans thing, I find this one quite perplexing, because there is a huge outlay that is required to grow medicinal cannabis, and so all that will have to require a lot of large companies or large external investors coming into the island to set it all up to have it growing. And I wonder what that will do to our local smallholders, local farmers who are trying to diversify their economy, because exporting out of Jersey is quite expensive for our normal crops. And so whether I would support that section of it, I'm still yet to be persuaded otherwise. And then when it comes to the government's initial amendment to his amendment, again, I think that's a comfort thing. I think just to say that only 10% of that agricultural loan will be given over, but I also have great faith in the people administering that agricultural loan scheme to make sure that all loans are issued appropriately, to actually restrict the hands when a good scheme might come before it, which might require 11% of a loan. It might just be too much of a hamstring for that. So I'll support Deputy Jeanne's amendment to the amendment, but I will be voting probably against the rest of it.
Thank you, Deputy. Conotava, St Martin.
Thank you, sir. I'm grateful that Deputy Jeanne has brought this amendment distinguishing hemp from medicinal cannabis. She has clearly outlined why, and the distinction is critical. Jersey has both a legal and moral obligation to define medicinal cannabis cultivation as a pharmaceutical process and not large-scale agriculture. Unsurprisingly, I will be voting for Deputy Jeanne's amendment, and I really do urge members to do the same, as this distinction is critical for patient safety, public health and Jersey's economic credibility. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Conor St Mary.
Thank you, sir. I start by responding in part to Deputy Tadier's address in the sense that, yes, I think there is a general perception in the island that cannabis should be treated differently from agriculture, and I think that emanates from the time the industry's first set up, and dare I say it, the lack of regulation at that time. At that time, cannabis was regarded as an agricultural product, agricultural crop, and matters proceeded on that basis. And one of the main results of that was that glass houses could be used for the cultivation of cannabis without any application to planning consent. So we had a situation where many residents found themselves in the middle of or next to cannabis operations of some kind, with all that entailed. What it did entail was expelling or displaying nasty odours and noise. And that fear, I think, exists in the minds of many people. It is the case that subsequent to that, the regulations were amended so that growing cannabis in a glass house does now need planning consent, and that planning consent in turn needs an environmental impact assessment, which wasn't previously the case. And I think that was the heart of the matter. I suspect that if those regulations were or have been enforced at the outset, a lot of the concerns that the public now have may not have applied. So I mentioned that point specifically to show that, just as Deputy Jones said, that there are changes in the definitions of cannabis, there has already been a change in the treatment of a cannabis product in the terms of agriculture, so it's perhaps no great departure to do that as well. The other aspect I mentioned is, well, so continuing on that theme, my understanding today is that anyone setting out to grow cannabis through a glass house or otherwise does need to go submit a planning application with all that entails. I'm also heartened by the fact that it seems in certain cases people whose origins of growing were prior to these regulations are now taking heed of that. And I've only recently seen references to steps being taken to remedy odours being emitted from premises and noise, and there is a greater willingness of certain industries, we can call that, to liaise with the local population. So that's a heartening result, but I make the point that the key, I think, is to ensure that cannabis growers are mindful of their obligations to the public as a whole, and if they are, and if they can subscribe to those with particular concern to odours and noise, I'm unsure as to why they should be excluded. I think in that connection, I do refer to the terms, the agricultural loans. It is my understanding is that a board sits, they will have discretion to award them, and I do hope that somehow there is a mechanism to, in considering an application, to link that application to their performance in terms of planning applications and local nuisance. That might in turn be passed on to Treasury, who I think is the final signature on the cheque, I haven't put it that way, but I like to think between them they can so arrange it that anyone who has so far not ridden in accordance with the laws will effectively exclude themselves. And the other point I'd like Deputy Jen to clarify for me is that we talk about or distinguish between growing of cannabis and medicinal cannabis. I just don't know. Is it the case that when it's grown for medicinal cannabis, as matters stand, the production of any product will be done as now is outside the island. Is it feasible? Is a crop from day one identified as either cannabis or medicinal cannabis, i.e. can a crop be grown for both, and the island will not know which it is until it has been exported and taken on by a German producer. So I'm not sure that helps anyone, but I think that, as I say, my main point is that the bad reputation of cannabis growers began through the lack of regulation at the outset. And if belatedly we can address that, then it may be that I'm not so much against the idea of cannabis producers being included within the definition of agriculture producers. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conor. Does any other member to speak on this amendment? I call upon Deputy Joan to reply. Deputy Joan.
Thank you, and thank you to all those who have spoken. The debate has been really helpful, and many have spoken who've supported to support my amendment. The amendment have added all the arguments that I've used in the summing up. So I'll try to be short and sweet. But first of all, I'd like to address Deputy Ozif's concern about if you can smell the stuff, you'll get stoned. I lived for many years in Amsterdam. And I can guarantee that I was able to get a master's degree walking past many a coffee shop, and I didn't get stoned from that. So,
if the deputy would give way, I was actually talking about medicinal cannabis production, not hemp at all.
Well, at any stage of the process, but thank you for clarifying, Deputy Ozif. So my amendment is a simple one, and it's to ensure that hemp is left on the agricultural loan scheme. And to the Connotab of St Mary point, as I outlined before, there is actually already a distinction within Jersey law about what is defined to be a cannabis for medical grown products. There's an acronym, so I'm thinking of how to say it. Cannabis-based products for medical use versus industrial hemp. So there is already in both our income law and also our income tax law, and also in the misuse of drugs law, there is already this definition between the two for growing in the island. So I'm not sure about coming in, that is a different thing, because we're talking about having access to agricultural loans and what kind of criteria would be developed in that regard. And my amendment is asking members to support that whatever the discussion is with further to the amendment by Deputy Ozif, that there is a distinction made, and that this distinction is already defined in law, so that can be transposed into the agricultural loan criteria, and it can be done very simply by transcribing the law that actually defines the difference into that agricultural loan criteria in the future. So on that note, I would like to request members to support my amendment to the amendment. Thank you.
Is the appel being called for? That was called for. Invite members to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the voting on the amendment lodged by Deputy Joan to the 24th amendment. All members here and present remotely have the chance of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. can announce the amendment has been adopted. 27 votes pour and 18 votes cont.
The 18, please, and the for and against, please, sir.
Yes.
Come with.
Those members voting for the Conotapa, St Martin, St Clement and St Saviour, and Deputies Luce, Morell, Ayer, Gardner, Gorst, Farnham, Moore, Ozef, Balash, Coles, Porray, War, Miles, Scott, Renouf, Jearn, Howell, Kovac, Alex Curtis, Wilson, Andrews, Dublé, Labby and Rose Binet. And those members voting conch, the Conotapa, St Helier, St Brelard, St Peter, St John, Groovel, St Mary, and Deputy Southern, Tadier, Lehegra, Bob Ward, Owls, Beltham, Miller, Tom Binet, Ferry, Barbara Ward, the Conotapa, St Juan, and Deputy Catherine Curtis.
I'll move on to the amendment lodged by the Council of Ministers to the 24th Amendment, and ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Page 2, Part 1. After the words, subject also to restrictions on the provision of agricultural loans, delete the words, to exclude provision of such loans. Page 2, Part 2. After the words, subject to restrictions, for the words and exclude, substitute on, and after the words, the cultivation of cannabis in Jersey, insert the words, and ensure that any such loans represent no more than 10% of the total funding allocated to the fund, and that no individual loan is greater than £250,000.
Now, to assist members, these two amendments were lodged at different times, and there's no one single document before members indicating how these amendments, if adopted, will work together. But the effect of the two amendments, if both adopted, taking the terms of paragraph O of the proposition, is the utilisation of funds from the Agricultural Loans Fund will be subject to restrictions on the provisions of such loans for any purpose relating to the cultivation of cannabis in Jersey that will be used for cannabis-based products for medicinal use, and ensure that any such loans represented no more than 10% of the total funding allocated to the fund, and that no individual loan is greater than £250,000. That's an illustration of the effect of both propositions if they are both amendments, if they're both adopted. Minister.
Sir, for clarity, when you say if both amendments, you're talking about the Council of Ministers amendment, which you're about to hear about, and Deputy Ozef's amendment.
Yes, but there's no document in front of members which illustrates the effect of both amendments if they were both to be accepted by the Assembly. Yes, who is going to speak to this amendment by the Council?
Deputy Morell.
Yes.
Sorry, sir. Yes,
Deputy.
thank you, sir. I just wanted the clarification there in case members thought you were talking about Deputy Jearn's amendment and this one, so it was just purely for clarification issues. Sir, I thank members for engaging in the debate so far, and sir, of course, I urge members to support this amendment, the Council of Ministers' second amendment, which would ensure that the Loans Fund is deployed in accordance with the legislation which underpins it. And by doing so, recognise the high capital inputs of medicinal cannabis, and so limit the fund's potential, but at the same time limit the fund's potential spend on that sector at 10%. Why, sir, have we brought forward this amendment? In my mind, it is very simple, sir. We have, as an island, adopted a strategy and adopted policy and adopted law which enables investors and agriculturalists to develop and cultivate medicinal cannabis and to then sell that principally on an export market. This should not be confused with prescribing in Jersey. This is principally an export market, sir. We have, in the process of having done that over the past, I'd say approximately 5 to 6 years, since 2019, thereabouts, we have seen anywhere between 60 and £100 million of investment come into the island, sir, as a result of that. So the island has said, quite simply, on the one hand, this is an industry we would like to see take place in the island. The states voted on that. and they said this is an industry we'd like to see take place in the island. We then enabled that to happen, and various parties have taken up that offer. We know that there are medicinal cannabis farms in Jersey at the moment. There are 4 which are licensed, I believe, and the first ones are now in revenue and selling their products abroad. We expect that to accelerate over the year ahead, and we would hope to be seeing profits being made in the next couple of years. So that commitment from the states of Jersey, on the one hand, has been taken up. The farmers, the agriculturalists, the cultivators of medicinal cannabis have accepted that offer, and they themselves have then come to this island and have invested tens, if not, like say, close potentially to £100 million of capital into this island as a result. Jobs now hang on that money. Investment in terms of the construction sector, various consultants, people are living off this industry. This industry is playing an important role in the island. The Constable of St Mary was absolutely right to point to the use of greenhouses or glass houses. Glass houses are now being used that were once derelict. This is having a good impact on the island. But the thing that really concerns me with Deputy Joseph's amendment is that it then says, but we don't actually like you that much. I am worried that we're saying, on the one hand, please come here, please invest in Jersey, but on the other hand saying, but we don't really want to help you too much. We don't really want you to do very well. I worry that in an island which has economic challenges ahead, particularly in the issue around the ageing population, the need for productivity growth, here we have an industry that is on the cusp of becoming a highly productive industry, and we are, on the one hand, telling it, we don't really want you here. That worries me. Deputy Joseph himself said in a previous debate today, the economy hangs on confidence. We can only create confidence in the economy if, as an assembly, we create certainty for investors in that economy. And that's what this is about. We need to provide investors in Jersey with the certainty that when we say, please come in and do X, please come in and invest in this, that we then stand behind that and don't create artificial distinctions around it that somehow then penalise them for having done what we asked. Now, I agree, I am concerned, Deputy Tudier may be correct, that there is a kind of moralising that's going on here. That does worry me. Because we as an assembly are the people who said, please come in and invest your money in Jersey, and that's what these people have done. And they've invested significant amounts of money in the island as a result of that. And that's something that the island should be grateful for. It's something that's really important to the island. I do accept, and I think the Constable of St Mary is correct in many ways, that the very beginning of this industry got off on the wrong foot in some ways. And I know, as does the Constable of St Mary, that neighbours around some of the farms have had concerns and have had issues. And it has taken a time to get those worked through, but I believe we're now in a better place around that. And I will say to the Constable of St Mary that if this Council Minister's amendment is supported, then I will ensure that the policy around the agricultural loan scheme, around this part for medicinal cannabis, does reflect the need to have proper stakeholder engagement and to have all planning conditions adhered to in advance of them ever receiving such payments from agricultural loan scheme. So the argument I am making here is that Jersey has to be consistent if we are to be seen to be a place where you should invest your money. And I really am concerned that Deputy Joseph's proposition takes away that consistency and ultimately undermines the message that Jersey is open for business. I think it's really important that we also acknowledge that the production of medicinal cannabis is viable under the agricultural loan scheme because it is a horticultural activity. Horticulture is small-scale crop growing. That is where this fits in, and the agricultural loan scheme is open to horticulture. Deputy Tudier did touch on this. We are in danger of saying, we're really happy for you to grow tulips, but whatever you do in Jersey, don't grow carnations. We really don't want carnations grown in Jersey. They are both horticultural. This is the same, to be honest, with the hemp and medicinal cannabis distinction. They're the same. In fact, actually, hemp is probably agricultural. Medicinal cannabis is horticultural, which is the scale that they're done at. But I do worry that this we like tulips, we don't like carnations element is where we're going down. And I just so strongly believe from an economic development perspective that this is not the sort of messaging that is helping Jersey in any way get its economy into a strong and robust shape for the challenges that face us. People have quite rightly mentioned the Agricultural Loans Board. The Agricultural Loans Board has been re-established as a result of Deputy Luce's proposition. And the Agricultural Loans Board is a body, again, that the state, I believe, needs to trust to do its work properly, needs to be left alone to do its work properly. The Agricultural Loans Board will be deciding what recommendations are made to the Minister. And in this case, there are two ministers involved. There's myself as Minister for Sustainable Economic Development, and there's the Treasury Minister. For loans under £150,000, I believe the decision can rest with the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. For loans over £150,000, I believe it has to be signed off by both ministers. And so not only do you have a robust Agricultural Loans Board, but you have up to two ministers being involved in the actual decision-making as well, which I believe should give the Assembly and give members comfort that decisions will be taken appropriately. When we look already at the considerations that will be taken into account by that board, they have a really handy list on their website. What are the key considerations for loan approval? Those considerations include the very viability of the business. So this isn't about speculation about a business trying to get a loan to stay afloat. If the Agricultural Loans Board has concerns about the viability of a business, it won't issue a loan or won't recommend the issuing of a loan. Key considerations also include productivity gains. As Deputy Joseph himself referred to, the idea of the medicinal cannabis industry was to increase productivity gains with the overall island economy. I am concerned that just at the point that the industry is moving into revenue and moving into a shape where it will create profits for the future, that we are trying to shoot it down. I do worry when any of us, when a change is in process, stand in the middle of that process and say, oh, look, it's not delivered what we said it would deliver. No, the industry is nascent. It is growing. It has had challenges. We've all learned through this process, I believe. One of the things that it does do, in order to maintain their license, all producers have to have good manufacturing practice, EU standard, in order to do that. That's something which, again, assures the quality of the product being created. In this case, those are plants. Other considerations include the return on investment. So what will the return on investment of that loan be? The management and skills experience of the people applying for the loan. The financial status of the business. Really importantly, the environmental impact, and this speaks to the Constable of St Mary's concerns. So the environmental impact of that agricultural undertaking, the social impact of that agricultural undertaking, and the economic impact of the agricultural undertaking. Those are all matters that the Agricultural Loans Board has to take into account, whether it is issuing or looking at a loan application from a dairy farmer or a loan application from a medicinal cannabis farmer. It has to take those into account. I think that should give us assurance that they will not be issuing loans left, right and centre. Now, one of the reasons we have come with this amendment to the amendment, which limits the amount that the fund can be used for, is because we do recognise the high capital costs of starting medicinal cannabis farms. We understand, therefore, that it is worth protecting that £10 million capitalisation of the fund to ensure that no 2 or 3 medicinal cannabis businesses couldn't extract the majority of loans from that. That, I think, is a reasonable thing to do, and that's one reason, that is the principal reason why we've sought to limit the amount that medicinal cannabis farms can apply to loans for. I think, again, that's a wise use of resources. Sir, I know that agriculture is an emotive subject in the island, and it's one that we rightly feel passionate about. But it is with that wider economic understanding that we need to think about how the Loans Board is used, and we need to be robust in its use. Some of the arguments I've heard here today do kind of speak to what I would call a slightly rose-tinted view of farming. People have raised the issue of smells. Deputy Joseph said, I believe incorrectly, that you could get high off the smells. I believe that's absolutely incorrect. It's no different to saying I live near a brewery, I could get drunk off the fumes from a brewery. I don't think that's possible. I'm happy to be corrected in that. But I think when we think of smells, I've lived in the countryside all of my life. There are smells in the countryside, it may come to some people's surprise in this island. There are. Conatard, really, there are. The smell of silage has often drifted past my doorway. That is something that I accept as part of living in the countryside. There are smells. So this idea, and it has been placed in this way today, that somehow the smells from a medicinal cannabis farm are somehow so awful that clearly they put those silage smells into focus, or into proportion, I should say. No, the smell of silage, to many, is not a pleasant smell. To some, they've grown up with it and they've got used to it. But I think it is important. We must not look at farming through rose-tinted glasses. Another thing has been suggested, I think by Deputy Ozef himself, is that farms are not businesses, was something that has been suggested there. Those weren't the Deputy's words, but he did say that medicinal cannabis farms are businesses. The implication being that farms are not. Well, I can assure all members of this assembly that whether you're a dairy farm or a grower, you are a business. All farms are businesses. The smallholders that we support now, we are supporting them on that road to becoming significant businesses of the future. Farming is absolutely a business, and medicinal cannabis is no different to that in any way. And so I think it's really important that we dispel this kind of false distinction between what many islanders see, because that's how we've grown up with the idea of farming being dairy and potatoes, and somehow something else being different. We had, when I was young, we had lots of flowers being grown in this island. Deputy Tadia referred to carnations. Growing medicinal cannabis is growing a flower. That's what it is. It is the same thing. So it's important, I think it's really important that members recognise the size of investment coming into this island through this sector. I think it's really important that members understand that messages sent by this assembly can create confusion and can undermine investor confidence in this island, not just around medicinal cannabis, but across all areas. Because when they see, on the one hand, an assembly which says, please come and invest, and then a couple of years later, on the other hand, saying, oh, but we don't want to help you, we don't want to invest, and we don't want you to invest that much, it sends the wrong signal, whether you're in finance, whether you're in construction, whether you're in hotels. It sends absolutely the wrong signal about Jersey's economy. And I really hope that members recognise that. I think it's also really important, something else that hasn't been mentioned. A few members today, including, I believe, Deputy Ozef, talked about subsidy. This is a loans fund. This is not a subsidy. This is a loan. There is an element of subsidy in the interest rate. The element of subsidy in the interest rate is because the interest rate is fixed now at 3%. And so at the moment, that's lower than something you would get from a commercial bank. And I accept that as a small element of subsidy. But these are loans, not grants. These are loans, not subsidies in themselves. And then the question is, why would you therefore want to help medicinal cannabis farms in the way by giving them a lower interest rate and lending to them? Why would you want to do that? Well, one of the things is, when these companies are in profit, they will be paying 20% tax to the Treasury. I don't believe other farmers pay 20% tax to the Treasury. I don't believe most other businesses in Jersey pay 20% tax to the Treasury. Some of them do. But this industry will be paying 20% tax to the Treasury when it makes profit. I think that's another reason why giving that mixed message is such a bad idea. We want this industry to help us bring money into public services. But at the same time, we are then in danger of saying we don't want to help the industry by giving slightly subsidised loans. I think that's the wrong message, and I really do urge members to think about that wider economic view. Please do try and put aside any views you may or may not have about cannabis, either as a recreational substance or as a medicinal substance. If you have problems with that, I understand that. But that's not what we're voting on here. We have, as an island, as a States Assembly, previously agreed that medicinal cannabis can and will be grown in this island. We have agreed that we will tax that, and therefore, I believe we must agree that we should treat it like all other horticultural and agricultural undertakings in this island by saying that you can partake in this loan scheme. But because we understand the high capital costs or high capital intensity of that industry, we will restrict the amount that's available to it so that the other elements of the industry can also be assured of receiving agricultural loans. So, sir, with that, I do move the amendment.
Thank you, Minister. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So can I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm quite happy to put my head above the parapet to say I'm lost, because there may be other members who are, but just not willing to do it. So the last amendment said that it will exclude cannabis-based products from medicinal use from the loan scheme.
That's right.
We're now talking about the loan scheme for cannabis products. So effectively, we have removed all cannabis-based products that are used for medicinal use from the loan scheme we're now talking about as proportional. So I'm not entirely sure what cannabis we're talking about. We're just talking about hemp.
Sir, the amendment hasn't been passed yet, sir.
No, I mean the previous amendment, sir. Which was
The
voted
effect of the...
Just
Can I
lost
assist?
sight.
Can I assist, Deputy Ward? The effect of the amendment that you have adopted, the amendment of Deputy Joan, is that the utilisation of funds from the Agricultural Loans Fund will be subject to restrictions and exclude the provision of such loans for any purposes relating to the cultivation of cannabis in Jersey that will be used in cannabis-based products for medicinal use. That's what you've adopted. Has
No,
Jane
sir.
got a question?
That's Deputy Joseph's amendment, sir. Sorry, apologies.
So that's your amendment, Deputy Joan. I'm reading from your amendment. The original amendment did not mention cannabis-based products for medicinal use. And the purpose of your amendment was to ensure that the reference to cultivation of cannabis was limited to an exclusion of cannabis-based products for medicinal use. Now, the Council of Ministers amendment, which you're now considering, will have the effect of, I don't really want to summarise it, but there's a danger in summarising these things, but the effect that it will be possible to make loans for the purpose of cultivation of cannabis in Jersey that will be used in cannabis-based products for medicinal use, but there'll be a limitation on such loans to 10% of the total fund.
Thank you.
Members content with that?
Thanks, sir. So effectively, it supersedes the previous one.
Yes, if you adopt it, yes.
So may I raise a point of order?
Yes, Deputy Bailiff, yes.
So I don't understand, sir, how the Assembly can adopt an amendment from Deputy Jeune which excludes the use of the fund for loans for cannabis-based products for medicinal use, and then subsequently consider an amendment from the Council of Ministers which appears to embrace the use of loans for cannabis-based products for medicinal use. And it does seem to me, and this is my request for a ruling from you, that the only way in which these two amendments can be sensibly reconciled is that the Council of Ministers amendment seeks to impose a further restriction, additional to the restriction which has been imposed by Deputy Jeune's amendment. And the additional restriction is that the loans cannot be represented by more than 10% of the total funding allocated to the fund. It doesn't seem to me that it's possible for, I listened with great puzzlement to the Minister because I don't understand how it is possible for him to be talking about medicinal-based cannabis products when the Assembly has just excluded the possibility of such products being the subject of an agricultural loan.
Does any member wish to address me before I make a ruling in relation to these matters?
Yes, please, sir.
Yes, Deputy Scott.
Is it possible, if the effect of the Council Minister's amendment is to negate Deputy Shern's amendment to a certain extent, i.e. to the extent of allowing loans to producers of medicinal cannabis just to that extent? Because I'm just trying to, again, I've been trying to square exactly how these two amendments marry up, and it does seem, and I did have the concern also that the effect could also be the restriction of loans given to hemp producers. So I very much support you ruling exactly what we're talking about. Thank you.
Yes. Deputy Gorst.
So hindsight in politics is a marvellous thing. It would seem to me that Deputy Balash is absolutely right. Precedent would be that the Second Amendment needs to fall away. And in hindsight, perhaps we have considered the amendments in the incorrect order. But we have now considered that amendment, sir, and we are only 4:10, so I'm not sure whether you are going to require some time just to consider your ruling, whether that means we need to break for 10 minutes to allow you to do so, but I wouldn't want to put you under undue pressure.
Well, the Council can always seek leave of the Assembly to withdraw its amendment if it wishes to do so, dealing with one of your points. Yes, Deputy Tom Binney, you had your light on.
Yeah, so very briefly, I just want to make it, just place on the record that my previous vote was made with Deputy Balash's considerations in mind, and I think that may be reflected by a number of different members, sir.
Yes, Deputy Taddeo.
So I was just going to ask if Deputy Gorst was making an adjournment proposal for 10 minutes, I'd happily second that. In the absence, I'd happily propose a 10-minute break, sir, and if a member's willing to second that.
So if I may as well, my previous vote was on the understanding that the Second Amendment didn't fall away, sir.
Both were approved for lodging.
That was it.
But they are plainly independent of each other,
but
in the sense that neither gave any thought to the other's contents, which is why we have this particular issue. Unless anyone else wants to make any remarks before I retire for 10 minutes, then I'll retire for 10 minutes with the graphic.
So can we retire as well?
You can do it. You can do what you like, as long as you're back.
You'll never retire.
Right. I'll turn your light off.